Let's just say I've had this mess up enough. So I'm going to record it in two different ways. All right. Now, I know that if I keep calling you Dr. Reese Sabatini Blake, it's going to be like a lot. Can I just call you Doc or Doctor or how
You could just call me Reese.
Reese will work? You just call me
I,
Rick. You don't have to call me Rick, codename Curse Breaker. You don't have to do that. But no, very exciting. Awesome to meet you. Definitely, if you can, like, you can share what it is that you've got. I know you've got your book, Paralysis, Beating the Odds, but then also like part of your story and especially the mindset aspect of your journey. I'm very excited to hear your story. So please introduce yourself to the people who haven't had the honor to know who you are yet.
well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody. My name is Reese Sabatini Blake. I am an Indigenous medicine woman by training, specializing in rehab physiology, chronic pain management, and trauma recovery psychology. I am also a best-selling author with my debut novel, Paralysis Beating the Odds, to which I just released the sequel, Paralysis 2, Hot Takes and Self-Empowerment, which hopefully will join the ranks as a bestseller in the near future.
Very, very cool. Now you're trying to get a message out. You're writing books, you're sharing stories and stuff. Tell us yours. Tell us, like, how did you come to where this journey has gotten to this point? Because I think there's a lot of people right now who feel hopeless. They feel like my plights are unbeatable. I have a diagnosis. I have a situation. I have a thing that has been told it is my identity. I cannot beat it. I will never be more. This is what I am meant to be. And I have a far less exciting version of this that I can correlate my own life to the same battles that you've done, where the mind over matter versus, or even more so, mind over diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I would like to hear your story. Tell us about like how you've gotten to this point. Where'd you start?
Well, I mean, even if we take it back to the initial paralysis, I was really fortunate. Before I was paralyzed, I was a competing and training martial artist in Taekwondo, and I also had this very niche interest in neuroplasticity. I had been reading about it since about the age of 12 or 13, and when they told me that I would never walk again, I said, that's not true. I also threw a middle finger to the air, and 2 weeks later, within parallel bars, I was walking. It wasn't great, but from right there, from my own knowledge, before I had even branched into my medical training side of being a medicine woman, I knew that I could beat it with the right calculated dedication and also like allowing myself to feel the pain, the anguish, the defeat, the complete rage at times that my body was not moving as it used to in a high performance athletic way. And, instead of giving up permanently, having a day where you give up and you allow yourself to sit in that, screw this, I'm done. Well, take the day, right? Treat yourself like an athlete. Today's not working. Try tomorrow. Try the day after that, right? The key to success is just getting up more times than you fall. I'm not sure who said that. It's not my quote.
I'm pretty sure it was Rocky Balboa. I'm just kidding. Well, also Rocky Balboa.
Yeah, true. He has said it for sure.
As I want to give you a testament. I know that there's more to your story. Just even with that right there, I think that it's easy for people to miss how powerful some of the moments are here. First off, in the warrior's way, we have the concept of challenge everything. Everything deserves to be challenged. Ask questions, dig in deeper. Is it true or not true? Let me test out the theories. And someone says you will never walk again, and you said, I challenge that. No, you in neuroplasticity, I know that I can challenge this. I challenge that. And I'm going to get my warrior side out and fight against the belief system that I will never walk again. I'm not going into surrender. I'll go through grief. And like you said, I went through grief. I went through each one. You went through denial. Is this really real or not real? Okay. Is this my reality, not my reality? Is this true or not true? You have to go through that fight, the bargaining. Well, if only I did this, I wouldn't have this. If only this were true, then this wouldn't have happened. If only I could have done this. If only this wouldn't happen to me, then I would be like this. You got to go through it. And then the rage. Tell me I can't. Tell me you don't have that piece where someone says you can't. You're like, watch me.
That's me.
Yeah, I
If
call it
anyone
motivation by
says
test.
you'll never do that, I say, fuck you, watch me.
Watch me. There's a part of us. This is also one of the motivation styles. And then how much did you have to go through the sadness and the anguish of like going through this stuff? How much sadness was in there?
So much. And within that year, so many more horrific things happened that it was this multi-layer grief to the point that I didn't want to be here. I I kept appearing as if I was moving to forwards in recovery and life, but I was faking it and holding on because when you are paralyzed, you lose a family member and you experience a whole lot of assault, your mind is destroyed. Like my psyche was broken, and it was through counseling from then to even now that has helped me overcome those aspects. Like I truly believe in therapy. I'm really glad that a lot of the work that I do now is within mental health with other warriors that have not found success within traditional Western methods of current medicine.
I highly agree. This is again, the warrior in you challenges everything. Am I really meant to just treat my symptom, or am I meant to treat the cause? Am I meant to live as a diagnosis for my identity, or am I meant to be more? The things that people tell us, I have a specialty degree, or I have a thing that says the thing, so you shall believe in nothing more than what I tell you you should. Challenge. The warrior in you says, no, I will not lay down because you tell me I shouldn't stand.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's a
It,
pushback. There's a push.
well, and it's really in my personality. Like I'm really lucky that the way that I'm hardwired, that no, watch me. Or anytime someone gives me an order, my immediate response is no. Most people are not wired like that. They've been properly conditioned by society to agree
Conform.
or submit or will conform.
Yes. Conform. Don't push. Don't ask questions. Don't challenge anything. Just be what we say. Ironically, this is something we're both in the industry for human behavior. It's interesting. I think they showed a study that even during, and I'm not, giving COVID advice, but during COVID, how this showed that around 50% of people on this planet do not have critical thinking skills. There was no challenge, no questions, no push, no, is this correct or not correct? Let's look at anything more than you're told what to do, and they just do. That was a fascinatingly high number. I will question nothing. I will challenge nothing. I will look into no information. I will not read a case study. I will not look at anything. I will only just do what I am told, and there will be no questions. In fact, do not question that I do not question, because I will give you an excuse or a justification.
Right?
And so to be able to go like, well, hold on, is this really the best way to do it? Is this correct? Is it not correct? Does this work right or not right? What are the results and how is it working? Has it been positive or negative? Like, we should ask questions. We should challenge everything. People should challenge me. They should challenge you.
Oh yeah. Hey,
Challenge
I love
everything.
it. I love it when people challenge my ideas because it always like encourages and forces me to go and learn more. And you don't get to where I am in a career without just agreeing to continuous knowledge for the rest of your life.
Mhm.
I'm constantly looking into studies. When people come to me and they have questions about things I don't know the answer to, I'll admit, okay, I don't know the answers, but if you give me time, I'll find them.
Yeah. Thank you for revealing that there's a new place to learn. Like, if someone says, have you ever
Exactly.
read this? Have you ever heard this thing? Have you checked it out? I'm like, no, I haven't heard of that one yet, but I will now, now that I know it exists. Thank you.
Exactly. Like, there's no shame in admitting what you don't know and just seeking out further knowledge.
Yeah. It's just yet. I just don't know yet. I've never heard of it. Now I know. So I'll learn more. Thank you. Instead of defending. I like that though. You're lucky you're a nonconformist. I don't know if it's luck because I think that this is a survival system that you had to create to make it so that you could make it.
Oh, very much so. Like, very much so. I mean, even the underage sex work that started before I was paralyzed and continued, and I finally stopped when I was 23 when I finished my formal training.
That's some hardcore stuff. You said you helped people like through like underage sex work, like human trafficking and stuff like this. Is that where you worked?
I, well, I was in it.
Oh,
I myself was trafficked.
hmm. I don't want to dig too far into something if you don't want to share, but like I've had some people who have worked through
Uh,
some pretty tough traumas in those areas. And especially maybe if this is a contributor to your non-conforming to where like I will not just follow. If this is a contributing factor, would you be open to sharing like this is the
very much,
experience? Yeah, please do. The floor is yours. Please do.
right? I mean, it really started when I tried to get into a low-level theater, and the people in charge of these shows and the bookings said, well, you have this secret as a trans woman, and if you want to keep that a secret, you're going to do what we say if you still want to perform. Then from there, I continued down the path of sex work for years. I mean, as mentioned in book number two, I it was finally in grade 11 when a teacher and a social worker pulled me into a room and said, hey, we've overheard some of your conversations. We know you work full time, and we know that you're not really sleeping at night. Are you hooking? And I mean, technically, yes, but I mean, I was escorting at the time. It was super high risk. At the time, I was 16 and 17. But, but I mean, they had known. I had been a red file kid for years. It's just when they finally had the guts to say something and ask, okay, will it make your life incredibly worse if we get involved in this? Or are we going to let you handle it and you're just going to follow a set of safety rules? Luckily, they let me handle it on my own because I needed it at the time. But most other people probably would have let them get involved. But I used it as my income. Then later on, it I reclaimed it when I switched from doming or escorting to doming at 18 in more of the BDSM and kink without actual sexual exchange. Which most people may know or may not know that those are called scenes. And that for me was really reclaiming my body, my power, myself, and that this is who I am, this is consensual, and just not letting anyone else be in charge anymore. It wasn't forced at that point, it was fun once I realized that people who were requesting like BDSM and pain play need it. Psychologically, it is the best thing in the world for them, and it actually helps them heal. Before being in that stage, I just saw it as violence. And at the beginning, I saw it as very violent, and that was harmful to me until I saw and it truly clicked in me that that was what they needed. And it was fantastic for them.
This is an interesting. This is like there's a lot of areas here. I think people have. There's a lot of controversial conversation around probably the whole thing. So I'm sure you've been in
Mhm.
some pretty deep conversations. There's a lot of different ways. I actually think it's very cool that you would say that this is my reclaim of power, which works in almost all aspects, especially when people have taken advantage of people's bodies and have helped work with women a lot, especially in the rape field or even
Mhm.
young guys who have been molested as children, like to take your power back. And you have to do there's a degree of like you said, the neuroplasticity of being able to do a neurological reprogramming on that to go in there. And it's like the neurolinguistics is where we go in there, but like we got to go do that work. And it's tough to cut some of those off. There's a lot of pain in those areas and there's a lot
Oh
of
yeah.
triggers there. So for you to say that's how I reclaim my power, I think people would have questions if they really understood like what that is, because it's a weird line not to judge it between sadism and masochistic, like being masochistic in the situation where like, I actually find pleasure and arousal from causing pain to others, and other people would be like pleasure and arousal from having pain caused to me. There's probably a lot more questions than anything. So I'd be very open to kind of hear like that tightrope walk between like reclaiming power and sadism.
Right. Well, and for me, it's not the pleasure of causing someone pain. It's just a partner, so to speak, experiencing pleasure that was enjoyable for me. Like, not the act itself, but the result, which is even another layer to it. And, oh, well, you didn't enjoy it? No, but they enjoyed it enough for me,
Okay, keep going, because like this is not a whole
right?
of it. I've never gone down this rabbit hole, so I'd like to like please explain. This is interesting.
Well, and not exactly compersion, as in experiencing shared love of a partner who's also experiencing love, but similar in the aspect that another person's pleasure brings me pleasure, right? With whether I'm involved or not. I and I have to say, like, I was lucky enough to learn that, and I went completely polyamorous at 18 and really have mastered the art of loving more than one person at once through ethical non-monogamy, where it's each scene, each encounter, everything has its own set of rules, and within them, you follow them. There are safe words. There are actually multiple systems. Some people use a stoplight, meaning like yellow for, hey, like this is getting close, like something needs to change. Green for go and red for this needs to stop right now. But throughout all of that, like, and whether it be play, whether it be relationship structure, whether you're monogamous, we all have rules and boundaries that we have to follow to maintain our relationships.
With this type of outlet, would you say like this outlet comes from like there's some sort of a repression that they don't know how to, I don't know, tap into or express, that you help them unlock like that area, like to say I need you to do harm to me to have a release. Like what, tell me like your experience and what's happening there.
Yes, actually, usually it's actually from either trauma
Hmm.
or, injuries in the past that BDSM is actually, or when used properly, can be equivalent to a deep tissue massage in level of release and somatic healing. Because a our bodies actually hold like all of our past traumas within different cells and areas in our body. And through, for one person it may be pain, for other person it might be talk therapy, but they can both have the same results, which is wild. And most people are never brave enough to try it because it takes an insane level of safety and trust to explore those routes with someone.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a courage thing or bravery thing because like I don't know if the connection to it is because you said it's usually connected to a trauma or something from the past. Usually something has happened to make it so
Mhm.
this direction almost would you almost be like trying to tap into their worthiness? Like I have been used, abused, and have trauma in my past, and this taps into almost like, will you please almost punish me as to what my worth is to unlock whatever that stored energy is.
Right? Like whether it be self-worth related or shame
Yeah.
or whatever, like it's really tapping that.
Yeah, that's an
And
interesting area, man. That's very cool.
and and I have to say, like from experience, I myself have a long stream of sexual trauma, which was not in the industry. That was all in my personal life. Like started as a kid that was molested, as a child, ended up in sex work. I had rapey boyfriends, had 9 of them to be exact.
And that's an extremely high number. So like there's almost what was
Hey,
the vetting system here to have like such consistency?
honestly, the psychology of it was actually that I was seeking out the similar traits and characteristics to the person that molested me. And whether not necessarily looks, but in personality traits, all of them matched. And like they all followed, and until that I could actually like rewind my own trauma to a point where we got to my initial, I didn't know that that was the exact point, even though I had read it in textbooks. My mind had actually completely blacked it out until the right therapy unlocked the memory.
Yeah, that's a lot of pain. That's a lot of pain. That's a lot of pain to go through. And like even the initial person, was this like a family member that like sparked this entire system of madness?
It was my mom's boyfriend at the time.
Yeah, I think that it's hard to like, I'll just tell you like me as like, even I got three girls here and like it's hard to hear like little kid getting hurt. It's like
Right?
like like my heart goes out to you where it's like, man, like, who gets so much pleasure from hurting a kid?
Right? Like if someone did that to my kids, I would probably be arrested.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for sure. Well, they'll be picking up a body because like that who wants to get pleasure from hurting children? And that's I
Right?
mean, there's a darkness there that like somebody saw you and maybe as vulnerable because of the paralysis or whatever, like you can't stop. And so like that's a darkness that's like it's hard to tap into that level of even dark triad stuff. We start getting into just the darkest parts of what a human being is able to do. And that's the
Exactly.
the sadism part. And I wonder if the reason that you've reclaimed power through doing the BDSM is because it's your way to go into this darkness that somebody has pulled you into this abyss against your will, but how to maintain rulership within this realm. Like now
Yeah,
you're the one
that
in control instead of being controlled.
that's quite possible. I mean, in that world, I go both ways because I mean, I've been an athlete forever. I know how much pain and release endorphins and trauma, even through going through a 5 mile run.
Mhm.
Like that is healing. It might be excruciating some days, but it feels great.
Mm.
But no, that's definitely possible because I that there were years where I still wanted to cause other people pain. And I would never have done it, but like not in a scene outside of something consensual. But no, there were times where I definitely even wanted to harm those 9 men, and I'm glad that I had the support to not do that because I don't think I'd have fun in prison.
No, well, I mean, probably not. Nobody does. So, as far as having fun in prison, that's a very rare sentence. Um, it's a tough thing, though. I actually, it does look like one of those things where, like, if you can't believe in heaven, it's better to rule in hell than serve in heaven. It's almost kind of one of those things where you're like, I'm dragged into this nightmare. It's better to be the one holding the whip than be on the other side, where I'm not in control. I don't have power and somebody takes advantage versus I actually call the shots and I make the rules here.
Right. Well, and honestly, like even when I was still escorting, I that there's always an agreement between two people in those situations, and in sex work, like I was always safe. Nobody ever did harm. They might not have always known I was a minor because that shit was not discussed. But I mean, those who knew knew.
It's
I
tough.
mean, an entire community knew what was happening, and nobody stepped in. But
I've been doing a lot more work on myself and like the heart side of things. My heart side was repressed, like highly repressed. And so now when I hear these stories, I think like just my warrior side makes me like, how do you protect or how do you defend or how would you say, like, man, that's not right to do to somebody? Well, I'm with you. Like, how would you protect that kid? How would you protect that person? But like my heart side on this one just goes out to you. Like, damn, that's a lot. That's a lot of pain to try to process through. And there's a lot of like trying to manage through the hurt. And this is where like it does seem like the manifestation of hurt people, but you're doing it in a
mhm,
way to feel like I'm at least in control of how the hurt works because I was in a place that people didn't control how to hurt. And so now I can
yeah,
at least call the shots. It just seems like what's
right.
the healthiest version of hurt people.
Well, and keeping it safe, like because like you never want to go too far there because that just multiplies everything.
Then you become what you're trying to, it really does. This is where I'm finding it fascinating is that like, it's like you're trying to find how do we make it safe to do something that is by definition unsafe.
Yeah, exactly. And the taboo of it all, and I'm glad that those years are behind me. But at the same time, like when you had someone that you had explored the limits with, and there was a regular ongoing, you knew the limits, the safe words, the everything. Both parties were just having an insane amount of fun, and for me, again, like mostly just from their pleasure because I still, even though I was a martial artist for 10 years, do not like fighting violence or pain. Like I might like my own pain, but when I want that, I can just go sit for 8 hours and get a new tattoo.
That's true. That's the choice part to it. And I think that's also a part of you taking your power back is I'll do it if I want to. Not I'm doing it I have to deal with because now I can't stop or I have to.
Exactly. Like keeping it within the zone of tolerance in that, okay, this is still okay. And even any tattoo artist will acknowledge your tap out. Like
Sure.
hopefully you get through your line work. Hopefully it's shading and color in another session, but any respectable tattoo artist will let you tap out. And even the whole time, like Okay, you're shaky. Do you mind if I hold your arm or leg to the table? Yes, that's fine. Or no. Like that there's as much consent in body work as there is sex work as there is massage.
Well, even mind work. There's a tap
Oh,
out for I
that too.
overfill people's cup all the time where they're like, I have to process some of this. There's a lot. There's a lot there. And it's tough to be able to take on so much, especially with how much we have to work through. I have a few other questions for you because I find you fascinating. So I definitely have some questions, and I
Yeah,
think that people have answers that are very misunderstood. So I would like clarity in other parts too.
yeah,
I want to
yeah,
shift us back into because I mean, like, first, your story is already a testament to the human survivalism. But I want to go back to your ability that you went from paralysis into that battle into being a because you can walk and you no longer have paralysis, right?
No, I mean, I'm at 98% on my left side, but it's 98%. The other 2% will come as it does, and I don't care. I continue to train and rehabilitate every day.
Yeah, that's I think it's awesome. I want to hear more about the mental battle that you're having to recover your like to like heal your physical body because you like you said, people will say you'll never walk again. And you're like, watch me. Like I want to hear more about that fight.
It was grueling. For probably the first year, I was incredibly suicidal
Hmm.
because even though I knew the science was there, I knew I had the drive and the ability, I didn't know the timeline. And it was daunting, it was frightening, and I I didn't know how to manage it. No one in my life had ever been paralyzed.
Hmm.
I
Was
and no
just to
one
clear up for the paralysis part, did an injury or something happen, or was it like a like it's been there since birth? Like what happened?
no. During a neurosurgery, a revision to prevent epilepsy, I basically had a stroke because there was too much or too little blood thinners in my system, and the top of my brainstem spasm, leaving me hemiplegic on my left side.
Hmm.
The spasm was so minute they did not see it in surgery, and they only knew that they had paralyzed me and also cut part of my optic nerve when they woke me up.
Oh, so it's like epilepsy to stroke to waking up and being
Yeah.
eating like a whole nother problem is on top of this problem.
Yeah, when really it was misdiagnosed fibromyalgia, which,
Oh, that's even worse.
yeah.
So like here we are treating the wrong thing with the wrong treatment to have the wrong outcome.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, Western medicine broke my body, and that's why I'm really glad I'm an Indigenous medicine woman and I don't have to work in their hospital.
Fair enough. Yeah, it makes sense that you would rebel against. Also, it seems like rebel against is like your middle name. Like,
It
well,
it
gonna go against whatever you say.
it very well could have been.
Yeah, that's tough. It's oh, so much to have to go on to at once. I could definitely see too, like the suicidal part, how much pain that you have to hold in and all of these things. It's loss after loss after loss. And then like abuse and people taking advantage and the like another obstacle. I think a lot of people I talk to, like, especially I work a lot more with the men, and the men have a lot more suicide talk than the women do. There's a lot more like I sat next to the gun or I sat there ready to end it. I was next to the blade, ready to go.
Right?
And so those are like real thoughts. Tell us about how like when you had to face that thing, you looked at death in the eye. Like how did you push back?
Well, I won't lie. I have countless failed attempts before I finally healed the trauma, and in my case, also went and transitioned medically. And for me, having the right hormone in my body on top of the paralysis and everything else was one of the biggest keys to me being okay. And also finding a medication slash treatment plan that worked with my brain injury to keep me out of that spiral. Like my brain injury basically presents as ADHD.
Mhm.
So we finally last year actually tried me on a low dose stimulant just when I need it. And for me, it's a miracle. Like it it pulls me back to a neutral calm where I can process everything. I'm fine. I can sit with the hard stuff without wanting to put a gun in my mouth. But I'm lucky that I only need those occasionally because it's a controlled substance. They're always worried about misuse and addiction. And here I am. I take a 3 month prescription and it lasts me 10 months.
Yeah, well, if you can start working in on the roots, it makes so you don't need it all the time. Almost kind of like a emergency life
It,
jacket. Like you don't, if you're swimming, okay, I
exactly.
don't need the life jacket. Hold on, you know, but some
Exactly.
that's a lot to
And
go through. There's so much. There's a lot transformation, a lot of things going on. Like what an interesting life.
right. And to think I'm only in my mid 20s and I've done all of this.
Yeah, and I think even to be able to process through this much trauma. Like, and you said countless attempts, and this isn't, let me know if this gets too personal, but when you're saying countless attempts, is this like over medicating? Like I'm taking too many prescriptions, or is this, I mean, because I think that if you're like, no, I'm really going to do it, there's some ways to fail safe this thing really works. Like there's some permanent solutions here without like the appearance of the cry for help, somebody be there for me.
I've tried basically everything except jumping and a gun.
Yeah, those are the ones where you're like, well, no one can pull me back
Yeah,
for those ones.
right. Well, and I never had the right place to jump without an audience, and I didn't want to use the people I know in the underworld to get an illegal firearm.
Sure. Like I said, well, at that point, what are you worried about, the law?
I know, right? Like so ethical, but I'm breaking the law.
I don't think that if you're like, I'm just gonna kill myself, what are I worried about the law
Right?
for? They're gonna do
Yeah,
put me in jail after I die? I don't think so.
I much preferred the attempts with pills, knives, and rope.
Yeah. You will even still the rope one, if done right, gonna be hard to work your way back.
See,
There's a,
that's where we learned that I have an incredibly muscular neck and it would be basically impossible to break it.
I think many chiropractors will agree. This is hardcore. You got a lot of stuff here. A lot of stuff, Reese.
I'm a lot. I'm too much for most people, if I'm being honest.
Well, I think I think it's one of those things where people are afraid of what they don't understand.
Hmm.
That keeps it very simple. I mean, this is obviously, there's a lot of taboo areas here, like, and you're in you're in the single digits minority of like people who have been in these types of situations. Not saying sexual abuse is single digits, that's not, but like the way that you've had to go through things is a very rare set of circumstances. Throw paralysis and
Right?
throw in these medical conditions, and then throwing in going into the psychology aspect of how to rebuild yourself, or how to even find a system of control while staying in hell, like not even getting out of hell, but how do I manage my own
Right?
little domain in hell to
Right?
make
Like,
it so I
how do
can,
I manage my apartment building in hell?
yeah, like how do I run my business in hell is essentially what you're doing. Is like, well, we're going to make some
Right?
rules because there's a lot of people who run their business in hell very unethically.
Right?
You're bringing ethics to hell. That's very fun. If you think about it, that's a little
Well,
funny.
it's actually very funny. But I'm pretty strong with my ethics, and it's another thing that keeps me as an outsider. If
Mhm.
something doesn't sit right with me, I'm not for it. Like even when I started the doming, Like I had to be seriously convinced. And I was very, very gentle and was like even the clients and like you seem very uncomfortable with this. I'm like, I am, but if it's what brings you happiness, I will learn.
Hmm. It's interesting that with how much people have abused you for pleasure, that you would have a resistance. Not even resistance. Let's go the other way. It's not even resistance, but almost like a want to give other people pleasure when that has been the weapon that's been used against you.
Yeah. I, and in that way, right, I'm a complete anomaly.
Tell me
Most
though,
people,
tell me there's a part of you that isn't so happy you're an anomaly.
I'm very happy I'm an anomaly.
Yeah.
I mean the 2% of weirdos that actually go and do everything that they set out to accomplish.
Hmm.
I've done it. I mean I just moved, so I have to rebuild my business, but I've already achieved every big goal I had in life. I don't know what I'm doing with myself. I'm killing time now.
Well, that's interesting. It's kind of like if you've developed this much skill and understanding, what are you going to do with it? It's an interesting question. It's kind of like where does purpose come from then?
Right? And really it's working within it. It's doing the high intensity, like extremely traumatized counseling stuff with people who have
Hmm.
had no success in Western psychology and medicine, like taking it back to tribal practices from around the world,
Hmm.
not just my own. And and it's really just helping people heal because even though there's so much darkness in this world, there's so much light and beauty still if you have the time and the capacity to absorb it.
So something I can relate to with you on this is I grew up in also like a very abusive home, and like this is where like I probably can empathize with you, but also like sympathize with you at the same time, but not to feel sorry for, but also to like kind of like connect with. Is like I had every type of trauma except for sexual abuse. This is the only one I didn't have. But I had everything from like physical, emotional, abandonment, addictions, like went through all of the stuff, except I just didn't have the sexual trauma part, which is why like I'm, listening to your story, I'm like, man, this is the one part that was like that's it's so hard to hear a kid just being hurt like that. Like I don't like it. Like I'll admit, like I don't like it. It makes me want to protect you. The little kid going like, no, like don't hurt this kid. Like not okay. And that's the part where it's there. But I also, because that we both gone through so much pain and the concept of hurt people, would you say that because we had to go through that, we can actually change the slogan to hurt people, heal people?
It's very much hurt people, heal people in my eyes because yes, if you've experienced the first couple onion levels of hurt, you'll still want to hurt. But if you've been hurt to your core, you just want to help everyone. You see everyone that has that look of pain in their eyes, and you just want to give them a hug.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm right there with you on that one. When I see people struggle and I see the pain in somebody, people will show it in aggression, they'll show it in sadness, they'll show it in some type of armor or some type of defense that they put up to give a false perception that I'm good, I'm fine, it's cool, it's okay, it's whatever. But really, you can look in there, and anybody who's ever lived in hell or been in hell can go, I used to live 2 blocks from you. You can't tell me you're not there. Like I
right,
see where you're at. I know what that is. And so I think that's where there's a lot more strength. And this is where I think the challenge, everything, and pushback on Western medicine. I just did a podcast right before this with Nicole Janton, who she got her degree in psychology for anxiety. And she was saying like the Western philosophy medicine was not serving compared to the people who have actually overcome and beaten it. It wasn't the same answer. It was a different answer.
nope,
And even myself, what I do goes against the grain because I challenge everything and I say, does it work or not work? And if it's not working, we don't do it. But I've been pulling people out of their own miseries to say they are no longer using the medication they needed because we ripped the roots out of the thing that made them need it. They're like, the
Exactly.
problem isn't there anymore, so I don't need medication for something that no longer persists.
Exactly. And it's those root source solutions instead of just throwing a band-aid on it and tossing the person aside.
Yeah.
Like I don't care how many different avenues I have to try with someone until they have that autonomy, where they either put down the illness or they put down the trauma and they just keep walking
Mhm.
because they've found a way to modify their life in a way that causes them less pain or illness.
Yes. Agreed. It's a weird game. It's a weird game we're in right now, but I think we need the nonconformist aspect in all areas. And I think that there's especially today, there's a lot more stuff going on. I do actually want to get into, because I'll be very open. I have a couple of people in my life who are trans. I have only a couple, though. This is not it's not common enough that I have an entire group, but I only have a couple that I can identify with. I would like you to be able to give more clarity, because there's so much taboo around it, and there's a lot of bad publicity. And I don't just mean like the news or media. I mean, like, there's outliners even within the group that make it look bad, even if it's not meant to be the way it's perceived by like the outliners. And this goes from all sides. Every single group has the ones who are like, we don't even fucking do that shit. Like,
Yeah,
maybe some clarity to explain what that is, just as far as we know, the psychology route to it. The
right.
argument, is it a disorder? That's an argument. Well, it's an easy argument if you go like, well, what are some of the results? Well, one of the results is it's got more than a 45% suicide rate.
Yeah,
Like, well, that's higher than Holocaust survivors and slaves. Well,
yeah,
anything that has a coin toss on suicide, even post surgeries, well, that would be considered a disorder, because it means you have a 50-50 on just staying alive. Identity is very important.
right.
So, like, I'd love to hear, like, because you're educated, but also experienced in like both sides. I would love to hear your perception or perspective on like even this kind of point of view.
Right. Well, and in this, I have to say I'm lucky. I, growing up in my indigenous culture, even though I lacked the Nigerian and Italian because my dad wasn't often in the picture, I, I always had it explained to me as you're two spirits. You are both. And as I learned my culture and really got the medicine woman training, the only actual way to be two spirit is to be trans, to be a medicine woman slash shaman, and do both the medical and the spiritual work. Like it's a term that's very often misappropriated in North American culture that, oh, if you're indigenous and you are LGBT or queer, you are immediately two spirit. That is not true. And for me, I always knew. Like from as if I even go back to my memories between the ages of 2 and 4 before the sexual trauma, I didn't give any craps about a gender box. I've always been very fluid in presentation. I had hair down to my shoulders as a toddler and loved it. Um, but knowing even myself and how all it really took to change how I felt in my body was hormones, and even how many cis people modify their bodies with hormones. It's like, yes, it is a disorder, and I am very glad that it is still in the DSM, I want to say 15, as gender incongruence disorder, because that's truly what it is. But I don't see people as unnatural for being themselves or being trans or being cis. Like, there's nothing wrong with even being cis and heterosexual. It just means that you don't go both ways or the same way that you are. Right? I,
Yeah, I agree. Well, I mean, this is one of those things where like letting people be whatever you're going to be. Like, I think I probably go more libertarian in this aspect, where I'm like, I'm not messing with you. Don't mess with me. We're good. I don't care what you do.
right? Like, as long as you are causing nobody harm, why do we care?
Well, it's not my place to judge either. Even though like I do, and this is where I don't try to go ultra biblical, but even so, we're Christian. But it's
Yeah,
as much as people want to use the Bible as a weapon. If I just go Matthew 7, the first sentence is, "Don't judge people unless you want to be judged." Well, do you know who said that? That was Jesus. Well, how am I going to be a Christ follower and then not listen to Jesus? It's not my job. My job isn't to judge. I don't. He didn't. They didn't give me that job. I don't. At the end, I don't know if I did it right or if you did it right. Who knows? I don't know. I don't know the criteria. I have no damn idea. Could be a tally system. Who the fuck knows? I don't know. And
right,
so
right,
that's not my job. But my job is to try and be the best me I can be for as many people or humans as I can. And I don't care what happened or what I don't. It's not my job to judge. It goes against Jesus. Like that's not my job. But I will try and help as many people as I can because, like, let's just face it. Like as much stuff as you've been through, life's a motherfucker as it is. Like to have other people also just try to make it worse and use the Bible as a weapon just kind of goes against my faith as a Christian, because I don't think I need to use church or the Bible as a weapon as much as God would say, like, just love people as you love yourself, man. You
right.
don't, your story is brutal. I can empathize with your story, but even though we don't have the same views on some things, it doesn't mean I can't connect with you as a person.
Right. Well, and religion was weaponized against me in my own home. I One grandparent that I occasionally lived with in that house was Lutheran, and the other was Catholic. They both brutalized all aspects of my queer identity. Each time I came out, I got disowned. The first time I ever came out as just queer, my maternal grandmother's response was, "Well, I'm not getting great grandchildren now. I guess that doesn't matter." And she didn't talk to me for months.
That's tough, man. What a tough
But like,
rejection, too.
I knew from the time I was 5 I didn't want biological children. She was never getting them. And from the groups that I've run in queer peer support and youth social work before I completed my training, I have 7 that call me mom. They're not biologically mine. I didn't have to adopt them, but I'm their safe adult even as they stretch out into adulthood now.
Well, even still,
Right,
even just in the psychology world, you know that calling somebody who's not your mom can also create a whole new set of identity issues. Like this can create a different level of codependency and a whole nother issue of stuff where they don't they don't know themselves, which creates another complex issue.
right.
Yeah, this is complicated. Our little brains do not understand.
No, no, they really do not.
Speaking of, I got a couple of theories on things. I'd love to hear your perspective. Um, my wife's into she's certified through Enneagrams, and she likes to learn personality types. Have you ever done your Enneagram test?
I don't think so.
If you
I've
can't,
done,
if you can, just do it. They're free. Just do a free Enneagram test, just personality, and send me your top
yeah,
three. I have a theory that I think there's certain numbers that seem congruent because, like, and also I have a LGBTQ question too that I would love you to clear up for me. But um, I think I have a theory on Enneagrams for personality types, but also with like different aspects of like the direction people go for being like, I'm not following the normal. I'm breaking the mold. I'm not doing this. I have a couple of theories I would love to see if we could team up on and see like true or not true. And maybe there's actually a pretty cool thing we can find a consistency with that may be in like helping people understand themselves better through trying to figure out themselves.
yeah. Well, and the Enneagrams one, is it similar to the Myers-Briggs?
Myers-Briggs, no, that gets into the 16 personality types. Enneagram
Yeah,
goes into the 9 main personality types, but Myers-Briggs is how we operate. Enneagram is why we do what we do.
just curious.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Yeah, it's very different though, because whenever I work with people and I start with them, their Myers-Briggs changes. Because after you actually know yourself, you're like, I was answering as what I wanted, but not who I was.
right? Like
So
I wish I was an ENFJ, but actually I am an INFJ.
I think I'm only one. I'm an I'm an ENTP. So I'm like almost the opposite, just in one letter. This it's cool. I think it's fascinating to know. I'd actually just be curious on your enneagrams. If you could just email me like what you find, because
Oh, totally.
I'd love to see like what was your top three numbers, you know. And so I just want to see what you find because I have some theories, but I just want to see like without any influence, does my theory match up? I'm just curious because it may be
We'll
totally
totally
off, and
do
then that
that,
theory can get thrown in the garbage. It's just a theory.
right? Like
I got a,
we have
I got
so
an
many.
obvious question. I'm going to go from like the cis male point of view because there's a lot we just don't understand. Like, because I'm not in the room, and so I just there's the seems like the obvious questions. I've got more friends in the LGBT categories. I've got more in the
Mhm.
categories of like lesbian, gay, bi, like
Yeah,
which is sexual preference. That's what I'm
yeah.
attracted to. Like, but trans seemed like my identity. This is what I identify as, not what I'm attracted to. Well, I wouldn't put that in the same category because to say like I'm attracted to this, to say this is who I am, are not the same thing. And so when it starts getting into some of these, especially Q, I don't understand the difference. What does the Q mean? Like you said, this is queer. What's the difference? I don't know. Is it your identity? Is it a preference? I don't know what that one means.
Queer can actually be used in either gender or sexuality. It's a super blanket term for people who really just don't want or haven't narrowed. Like they don't want to be forthcoming. Like I don't walk around telling most people I'm pansexual. I often say queer, especially if I feel unsafe at what my response to their question may be taken.
But
Okay.
pansexual is like identify as no sexuality, right?
No.
Which one is pan?
Pan is being sexually attracted to more the person than their bits. So like men, women, non-binary people, but the person themselves, not what's attached to them.
Well, I mean, I'd be hard pressed to say even like even the way that I love Andrea, I don't love her just because of body parts. I love her because who she is. So I can't say like, you know, my attraction to her is just because of vagina. I can't say that. It's because I love that woman. Like I love her. And so
Oh,
like I
but
don't know,
would
does that make me pan then because I love her as a person, not just her bits?
but would you love a man or a non-binary person the same way
I
that
got
you love Andrea?
well, I don't love my guys sexually, but I love them for who they are. I love my guys. Like I got my warriors who I tell them I love you, bro. Like these are my brothers. Like I love that guy. And so do I
See,
love him
and
as a
that's
person too? But it doesn't mean I have to be sexual with anybody simply because I love who they are as a person.
and exactly like that's the difference between like the platonic and the romantic or sexual. And believe it or not, the romantic and the sexual are two separate layers that are
I
not
agree.
always congruent. Like sexually, I'm attracted to everyone. I mean, not literally everyone, but
But that
gender
one seems
wise, it
like
doesn't matter.
that seems like bi then, right? That would just be bi.
No,
I like both.
well, bi and pan can at times be used synonymously, but a lot of people are very just singular with bi, as in women and non-binary people, or men and non-binary people, or just men and women. It's not inclusive of all. It's just two. If if you
But
take it down to the linguistics,
this is the argument part is like, well, I mean, you know the biology to it. There usually are just two. Like there's either this part or that part, and it's like if you like them both, then you like them both. That's just bi. That's the B. I like them both. But to say like if there's somebody who's got like I don't know like a unicorn horn for a penis or like there's some sort of a different thing there, then like I'm with you. There's like, hey, there's what about unicorn horns? And I'm like, well, yeah, I guess I didn't account for unicorn horns. That's a totally different thing. But it just would be like in this one, the pan would be like, I love the person as the person. I'm like, well, you can love them either way. It doesn't seem like there'd be another category for just loving people. So it's confusing for like, why is there this thing or like how big of of a percentage of people who just go like, I don't want to identify as anything, so that means you should love me for identifying as nothing. Well, that's a weird thing just to do for identity.
Fair
I want to
enough,
identify as nothing, so don't love me for what it is. Like, it's a little confusing. This is what I'm trying to understand.
right? And honestly, it is confusing because we have gotten to a stage in society where we no longer use a textbook definition for everything, and we let everyone have their own, and excuse my words here, but uneducated opinion, where every person in the world is allowed to identify their own bisexuality or their own gender non-conformity or conformity to
Sure.
just describing it themselves instead of no, actually these are the initial definitions. Find the one that fits you, pick one. If it changes, let us know. But we've
This is the
shifted
this is the
in.
part that makes it tricky is like because it's kind of like Wikipedia. It's kind of like that where it's like
Yes.
anybody can just add it and then just say this is the new rule. But then everyone's like, well, when do we ever get to agree for just even words sake? Like, well, this is an identity thing, especially since identity, if messed up, and this is not even just in the trans community, just when people are really struggling with their identity as a person, and this can also go into like status or marriage or,
Hmm.
lost your
Hmm.
job or lost all your purpose. Like suicide becomes a very serious thing. And it's not just in, like sexual identity, it goes into every form of identity. So if identity is such a playful area that if you goof around in this area, it raises suicide rates, wouldn't it make more sense to not have like a Wikipedia on this one that just goes, let's just change it whenever?
And I actually completely agree with you on this. I hate that the newest generation of current teenagers has split everything into a subcategory of a subcategory of a subcategory.
Right.
We are four sub definitions away from everything the way it was a decade ago. And even I myself in my mid 20s am as seen as an outdated elder queer because
that's
I, I'm not following internet lingo. And I'm
that's
like,
so
no guys,
silly.
this is real life. These are the initial definitions. Pick one or shut up.
That's kind of well, even still, here's where I'm at as far as especially even like the trans or non-binary and that stuff. I don't understand the gender aspect of it. I feel like that word is the wrong part. Now, social identity, I don't care what you want to be called. I don't you call you whatever you want. I don't that doesn't bother me. If but I mean like do you have a boy part, girl part? I don't care what you identify as. If you want to go by Reese or Renee or Roger, I don't give a fuck. Like whatever you
Right?
want, I'll call you whatever you want. But to say my identity is my gender is Roger or my gender is Renee, I'd be like, well, no, it's not. That's your name. Like
Exactly.
I
And
don't care if you want to be identified as a woodland sprite or an attack helicopter. I don't give a fuck what your name tag says. I'll call you whatever you want. What's up, attack helicopter? You know, I don't give a shit. And that doesn't bother me. But
uh,
to say attack helicopter is a gender, I'm like, no, it's not.
no, it's truly not.
If you want
And
to be a
that's
boy
why,
or a girl attack helicopter, I'll call you whatever the fuck you want. I don't care.
yeah. But and that it it's really messy. Like even my own medical transition was messy because I I present in a full range of the spectrum.
Mhm.
My identity is actually two-spirit, and finding a way to acknowledge that while feeling a range of neutral masculine or neutral feminine without being hyper on either end of the spectrum was a battle. Like even getting the hormones right so that my body looks the way and performs the way that I need it to physically.
That is so
Because
hard.
I do train every day.
That's intense. That's crazy. Like that again, part of the world that I'm not in. This isn't even my field. So like I'm like fascinated by going like what is that journey like? You got to go through
Right?
so many difficult obstacles that like and
Right?
even harder is it's almost like you have to be a part of the let's just see if it works category.
And I really was, because like when I had my gender confirmation surgery, so known as bottom surgery, I we were doing the let's see if this fixes it,
What?
because I
What?
I I
After you already
and
had a surgery that paralyzed you, let's just practice.
right, well, and because we didn't know, and I didn't go all the way. I went with what's considered a half step between nothing and vaginoplasty, a bilateral orchiectomy. And for me, I that was the sweet spot.
That's wild.
Like
What an
like
interesting, like, just practice with your
right,
body to mind to transition. That's
right.
really difficult to handle. But also, like, this is where it also gets tricky too, because it does get into like where is the pool that you would fish in for like people who are like, that's what I'm attracted to. Well, that also is a smaller pool
Oh, yes, it is.
because it's a totally
It is.
new area. It's a totally new thing.
Yeah, yeah, because I have the third in your pants option.
It's a totally different thing. It's a total different option. Like,
Because, like, not to be hypergraphic, but without having cavity depth, it looks like I have both in my pants.
which is also
Like,
like a different, it's a different, like, I don't want to say it'd be fetish or a type of perversion, but I guess in like, no
oh,
matter what you like, that's what it is.
It
No matter,
it's it's definitely fetishized. Oh
yeah.
my God, is it fetishized?
Okay.
But not always in the worst ways,
Sure. Well, I mean, like if some people dig it, they dig it. Again, like I try not to
right?
be judgmental. It's like if you like it, you like it.
Right?
I don't
Right?
know what, it's not my place to tell people right and wrong. I don't know the
Right?
answers. But
It,
that's an interesting one. But I did have some questions on like the LGB. I understand like this is how I identify as my what I like. I would find attractive.
right?
Cool. Trans is like that's my identity. This is what I want to be known as. Like, well, I don't think what I'm attracted to and what I want to be called is the same, because if I said I'm attracted to my wife but my name is Rick, those are not the same. Those are different. And so I'm like, that would be different for me. The queer thing, even after I was talking, I'm still confused. I don't know what it means. Does it mean
Right?
pansexual, or does it kind of mean
It,
like, just whatever?
eh, queer is really just an all-encompassing label that people can use interchangeably when they don't want to
Is it the
define.
label for no label?
Sometimes,
Like it's like, hey,
like,
I
or
identify as queer because I don't want to be identified as shit. So just call me that
right?
because my identity is don't identify me. So that's what I call myself.
Sometimes, and sometimes it's that even though someone is a lesbian or gay, they don't want to be forthcoming about it. So they're just like, call me queer. Like, end of
Really?
the day,
Is this like
yeah,
more on the young side? Because like the people I know who are gay or lesbians, which is also just, I think is just both gay. They're both just like, we like the same sex, which is why I didn't
yeah,
know also why they get their own category. Even though I found out from my gay and lesbian friends, like turns out gays and lesbians are actually not, they ain't on the same team. Like they're like, we're
oh no,
versus.
oh no,
So there's a whole different thing there, which is why like
oh no.
we need our own
They
category.
and and that's actually the entire toxicity of the entire LGBT slash queer community, is that we are now at a stage where there is enough human right that
Fight each other.
each different alphabet hates every other age group and every other letter in the age group, and it's worse than like fucking Auschwitz in a gay bar.
Oh my gosh. Isn't it funny that the whole
And
entire
as
team is supposed to be inclusion and they hate each other?
and as and if you add race into it, it's even
Oh
worse. Like
no.
as a trans woman of color, I am so often spoken over, or we'll be having a conversation about my actual fields of expertise where my name is doctor.
Yeah.
And someone will be, well, I'm white and I worked here, so I know more. No,
What?
shut the fuck up, Stephanie.
Damn it, Stephanie. No.
Like this isn't even your field of expertise. You're just a colonizer.
That's so funny. Your hostess. Stop it. So that's very funny. That's
It's a disaster. I actually in business, I often have friends that say like, come to these queer business mixers, and I'm like, nope, I want nothing to do with that shit. If you want me in with the community of business mixers, let it be the POC community.
I think it is very interesting. I'm actually I appreciate you so much for like even this dialogue. Like so there's so many things that I've seen, like even the infighting that's been very funny, even in the LGBT area. Like it's funny. I remember watching there was like the council, like the LGBTQ council. Like they have the council, and like the lady who was a lesbian who like started it was kicked off the council because the trans person was arguing that a guy who identified as a woman who went to a women's prison and raped 4 women while in there, they should be identifying with his plight more than protecting women. And the lesbian was like, no, raping women is bad. Like, I don't care what someone's plight is. Raping people is not okay. And the lady who said raping was bad was kicked off of the council.
Right? And that's where we're at, right? Because, different scenarios, but that is a very common thing where if you are not leaning into the hypersensitivity of everyone, and no, no, if you're raping, if you're murdering, if you're doing any of this insane, inhumane stuff, it don't matter anymore. You're just a
Right.
criminal.
It's,
Like, I'm sorry.
like,
If I went and did murder, I'd go to the cop shop and I'd give myself over and I'd say, put me in prison wherever you want. Let's see how much fun this is.
well, they can't say you should be getting away with a violent crime because I'm having an identity issue.
Exactly.
Like that's where the part where it was confusing to me is the person who said you should be really empathetic to the identity issue of this person versus the pleasure they get from violently hurting somebody sexually. And I'm like, I can't agree with this one. This one I don't
No.
agree with. That person is in the wrong place. Like if they're getting pleasure from hurting people who are in a place that's supposed to only be women so they don't get raped, and some of the women in there because they were raped and they did a retaliation and they're like no more rape. This is it's crazy to see like the infighting for LGBTQ. That's honestly it's sad but funny. It's like such an ironic humor, like that
Oh,
twisted British humor.
exactly. It's hilarious, but it's also like incredibly broken.
Mhm.
Like like instead of gay bars and pride parades, we should have free rehab and therapy centers.
Yes. Well said. Like
And
struggling
I
with
say it
identity
pretty
is no joke.
regularly.
Yeah,
Like
struggling with
like
identity is not a it's not a playful matter, but it also does extend more beyond like to be like let's just be very let's not even be conservative. Let's be generous. The entire community is maybe what 3% of people, which is still millions of people, but still not a big number if you think about it. Like, and so to say like this 3% they've got enough because like even this is just not even just America, but even in America that's still pushing like 10 to 20 million people, so it's still a
yeah.
pretty decent number, and so even within there to go, well, we got enough to hate each other now. Well, hold on a second, there's too much hate for inclusion.
And for some reason that there seems to be just this disconnect. Like I especially between like sexuality labels versus gender. They
Hmm.
seem to have forgotten that even in Canada, uh, a trans person's rights to even transition are currently at war. Like it's way worse in the States. And I have to say, like, I don't support transitioning or surgery until your late teens. I don't support surgery until you're an adult
I
and you
think
can
I
make
think
those
even a little,
decisions.
maybe a little after pushing, because you already know as far as mental development, people won't have a fully developed brain until at the very like earliest mid 20s to 30.
Right? But
And
at
so
the
to
same
say like,
time, like,
I'm 16 or 17 and I want to do a permanent surgery, I do think that that's maybe a little early for that because I got 15 and 16-year-old here, and if I had to say they are competent enough to make a massive life decision, no, the fuck they're not. They struggle with what's for dinner.
right? And that's where, like, yes, support someone's identity to be themselves. If they want to do all the psychotherapies and get their letters, then start hormones. But don't touch a knife until you are older, and don't start hormones until you're in your late teens at the earliest.
At the earliest, at the very, very earliest is late
There, yeah,
teens. And I'd
like
still say later before you start doing that. Also, I have a issue with if you're gay, be gay. Like, why do you have to start changing stuff right away? Like, if you're just
right,
attracted to the same thing,
right,
do that. Do that long
right,
enough until you would change. I don't see any reason like you have to start chopping stuff off or adding stuff on until you're like, you know what, I've been in this game long enough to know exactly what I like. And
right.
so this is be gay then for a while, whatever.
And exactly, like I even my own kids in groups, it was no, you're gonna figure this out. We're gonna support you through it, but we're not rushing you. If anything, I'm dragging my heels in your transition because I want you to be certain.
Yeah.
And and there are lots of people like myself and other healthcare professionals that oh, we drag our heels.
So
We
do you
very
feel there's a
much
lot of
drag our
pushback?
heels.
Are you getting a lot of pushback in the community because you're not going along with like even like kids who are getting hormone blockers before puberty and stuff like that? Are you for or against that?
That's situational. I because if the child has presented in a way without encouragement from an adult, like
Yes.
this is who I am, then and when at the first signs of that hormone they get incredibly suicidal because that's often the case when the hormones actually start, then sure. But if that's not where they're at, no, stave off. Stave off until you are ready to break. Like work on that mental strength in the meantime and actually managing yourself and your emotions so you can better handle the wave of two puberties in your life.
Mhm.
It's no fun. I started mine when I was almost 21, and that was still a lot. I hadn't gone through the healing process of my trauma yet.
Mhm.
I But also within the first few days on hormones, I knew immediately, this feels really good. This feels like my own blood is in my body. It feels like I'm wearing my own meat suit, even if it doesn't actually look right yet. It feels better.
I think that even starting in your 20s is it just even though it's going to be an interesting transition for that, it's just I'm going to agree with that more. Now your traumas and stuff like they're extraordinary. Like these are level 10 traumas. Like the ones that you've gone through is like these are top tier. Like this is like
The
hardcore
worst of the worst.
PTSD, like you got to deal with stuff. So I do not have any glaze over on your plight because you've had to go through like max level damage. So like by no means am I belittling or making it smaller. It's a big deal. Just to be able to add insult to the injury and start going through like, well, you should also change everything about you without understanding yourself at all. It just seems like well, let's just turn the worst up to the worst. Like let's
Right?
amplify. And so that's going to be pretty tough. And I think that there's a lot of pressure today. How often do you see the pressure on people who don't feel like they fit in, but they feel like trying to change themselves would make it so they at least fit into a group? And you watch people try to force themselves into a transition just because they're confused and not because they're certain.
That doesn't happen as often as you think.
Well, I don't even know. So I
Um,
don't even have a thought. I have no idea.
no. But and there's this huge picture painted by the media
Mhm.
that people are misled into this, but that there are so many safeties before you get to a point of hormones. Like you have to live as yourself for years and identify the way you do before they'll give you a tiny little pill or a needle.
Mhm.
Um, because it's dangerous. I that there are risks, but it's actually often that like if someone is struggling and they will come to like these more social and peer style groups and they'll suss it out for a while. But they also know in, I would say, less than 3 to 6 months if it's not for them. I know people that identify as trans and two-spirit that even tried hormones and they knew that month, this is not for me. This does not feel right. I identify the way that I do, but I don't need to take the medical route at this. I just need
Yeah.
to do the social change. And unfortunately, even doctors today, like Western physicians, are still trying to get people into the conform and assimilate in the, well, if you're trans, you must go all the way, whether that be male or female. But these in between steps, like people like myself, I are still seen as taboo medically in the community. I have nothing in my body that makes testosterone. I am all estrogen. I'm medically and legally and even physically female, but because of what's in my pants, I would still end up likely in a male's prison, even though I need the estrogen to live.
Interesting. Yeah. What a weird, because you really are in, like, if you look at the grand scheme of timeline on these things, you're in the front line of, like, we're trying to figure this
Mhm.
out. And it is a tricky time. I actually agree with you on, like, the Western medicine push to, like, go all in and just go all in with this. That's what you either do it or you don't. Like, I'm like, we're in such a medical practice. Like, we're practicing right now on humans, and, like, it's such a kind of a tricky game to say just do one or the other. And like I said, I don't have grand judgment. I don't know the answers for those things. This isn't my field. Like, this is why
Yeah.
I'm happy to speak with you on this, because, like, it's not my field. This isn't my direction. But I have had people ask me, like, since I work primarily with men, I have women's groups, but
Yep.
I mostly work with men. That's where I work. And they're like, well, how do you, work with people who are non-binary? And I'm like, it's really not that common of a conversation. Like, there are millions and millions of guys suffering on their own, let alone running into, like, it's a smaller percentage of people who are the non-binary. It's just less common. And so I can't say that I have, like, a judgment to say, like, have any animosity or any negative feelings. It's just not common enough to have to even have the conversation. So this is a blessing. This is kind of cool to go, hey, here's a conversation I don't get to have very often.
Right.
And you're
Well, and
educated enough to go, like, well, let's actually look at it, instead of going, like, I'll get defensive and I'm offended by everything. It's like, no, let's talk about it.
right. Well, and luckily I facilitated these support groups for years. Like I know a medical transition inside and out both ways, and I know all the options, and it's been really beautiful and also disheartening at times to just see how much hell that trans people have to go through, not even medically, but just within the BS of their own family. I know more trans kids that are dehoused and disowned by their families, like dehoused or not. They're just,
Mhm.
okay, well, you're not one of us anymore if you're not going to keep what you have, or you're not going to identify with that name that I spent months figuring out. Oh yeah, even my own mother, she was royally, royally pissed off when I changed my name.
Yeah. That's what was your name originally?
My deadest of dead names was actually Anthony.
Anthony. Okay. And then you went, like, I'm going Reese. I'm just curious,
Well,
just my own.
actually,
Okay.
I before it was Addison, and I kept the family name at that point. Like the first and last were Addison Blake, and then when my family found out that I was transitioning, they fully disowned me again, and I took off the family name and I moved my middle name to the back and said, well then I'm self-made. And then my relationship with my mother and I ended, and then I took my father's surname and hyphenated it with Blake.
Mhm.
and I took one of my previous middle names and actually moved it to the front.
See, all right.
So
Now you were just
Addison is still in the name, but
well,
I've been through a process on naming and disowning my family and really just taking that power move of well screw you. And then it was dad and me that made me. And it's very public because everyone knows his last name and everyone knows that Blake was my middle name.
yeah, fair. It's funny. I was it's actually here's a funny thing too, because like if you can just change your name legally, I was thinking about this too also. I'm like, Andrea and I like we could change our last name to whatever we want. I'm like, I wonder why more people aren't like my name would be Richard Optimus Prime Batman. Like, I don't wonder why people aren't changing their name more. I'm just saying, like, you can change your name to whatever you want. Like,
Right? Well,
just
and
I understand legacy
especially,
and those things, but
right? Well, and in North America, where you really do have free reign versus like countries like Denmark, where you have to pick your name from a list of approved names by the crown.
really interesting.
Yes. In Europe, there is way less fuck around and find out.
Mm, but Denmark don't play though.
Apparently not.
You find out in Denmark.
Yeah, exactly. Well, here's how it is.
That's funny. Yeah, it's interesting. I was actually, you know what, real talk. I was kind of hoping that Reese was just because you're like, you know what, peanut butter and chocolate are fucking badass.
Well, I mean, if you want to know why Reese actually ended up in the name originally, I tucked it in there because in sex work, it was Reese's Pieces inside ya.
Really? Well, this is either TMI or hilarious. I don't know.
It's
Little
pretty
Mo.
funny.
That's wild. That's
Whoa.
that's funny. You got oh, you got me. That was a good one. All right, that's funny. You have Reese's pieces inside of you. That's funny. Good, well played. Ah, this is fascinating. I'm very thankful. Thank you for this conversation. Um, in what way could people like what are you looking to do like to be able to support people? Like how can you help more people or what is the I guess the direction that like if you could reach as many people as you can, what would your message be that you would like to share?
Honestly, it's cheesy and it's cliche, but don't give up, and it really does get better. Because if you have the right supports to get you through anything, whether it be a confidant and a friend, a lover, an actual therapist, a doctor that listens, a grandma, an elder, the old lady that lives down the street that likes to have tea with you, whoever it may be, like don't do any of this on your own. Then don't hold it inside. Like find someone who you can truly speak to and let it out.
Yeah. A message of hope. It gets better, but don't disregard your support systems and don't turn away your love. Well played. I like it. I appreciate your time. I really do. I gotta call it because I have a group to run soon. But I really appreciate being able to have this time with you. Like, thank you so much for sharing. Also, grab up your books. I know you've got the paralysis, the beating the odds, and then you had your new book. What's the new book?
Paralysis to hot takes and self empowerment.
I think it's fantastic. So yeah, grabbing up your stuff, and then maybe we could just check in again later because now like I have far better understanding of you. And I think that we could also get some other people like to like get in. Because I have some people who are like in the community that would be kind of cool to just have like different dialect or different dialogues. Maybe it'd be kind of cool to just have like different points of view or different clarity because it's like I said, it's a 3 percentile group. And even
Yeah,
inside that 3 percentile is infighting in like small clusters too, which is also makes it an even smaller group. And so even in the trans community, as much as it's very loud, I'd be surprised if it was even tapping into 1%.
exactly.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if it was a 1 percentile, but yet it's so loud. It'd be in the fringe group as far as, population goes. And so like it's still one of those things where there's a lot of noise around it and a lot of fear and a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of judgment, but I would honestly be surprised if it was like if it did tip over 1% of population.
Exactly. I don't think it does.
I don't think it
Not at
does
all.
either. I don't think so either.
Like, even if the queer populace has bumped up to the 1 in 10 statistic that's come out more recently, only one of those 1 in 10 is likely to be trans. You're probably looking at a 0.07 or a 0.08.
I would agree. Yeah, and I think that that's rounding up.
Yeah,
Yeah, and so that's why it's interesting. There's so much fear and animosity around this. I think it's just because it's the unknown, but it's not my place to judge. I don't really understand enough of it, and I don't know what final judgment looks like in anybody's race, religion, or creed or anything. I have no idea. I
right.
just know let's try to be the best that we can to each other because life's shit enough as it is. We don't have to deliberately go out of our way to make it worse.
Exactly. And I would be very happy to be involved in any future discussions.
Awesome.
This has been fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you very much. All right. Well, Dr. Reese Sabatini Blake, it's very cool to hang out with you. Thank you for this insight. Thank you for your vulnerability and openness in the discussion. And yeah, I appreciate this very much. I think I don't even know what comments or what questions will be in the future. Truth be told, I actually very rarely hang out in my own comment section. So I don't even know what some of my own stuff is. But whatever it would be, maybe there's some future questions or some future things that we can address, even if it comes down to like, I actually enjoy when people have judgments or have a negative thing because it just raises the awareness of like, this is something people don't really know. And it almost gives the opportunity to answer a question versus have a defensive posture. And so, maybe we can look at some of those and see if we can find some like opportunities in the future for us to just team up to give people just more awareness because I think that's more of a thing that in all aspects awareness. And if you have a disability and mentally fighting your way back, if you've gone in through human trafficking and finding hope to be where or hurt people heal people, and that you can have a purpose even through trauma, or being able to go like, hey, I'm in the smallest of percentile of people, but still there's a way to find connection and belonging. There's a lot of answers that can be found in this conversation. So I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, have an awesome day. And then just keep in touch. Let's talk again in the future. Let's, in the last few weeks, let's go ahead and have another conversation.
Hey, that sounds great. I look forward to it.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Well, be safe. I'll talk to you later.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye.